The Great Hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with quiet conversations as representatives from dozens of worlds discussed the day's agenda. Ambassador Zixthon of the Hegemony Empire adjusted his ceremonial robes and looked at the datapad in his clawed hands. The information displayed there was almost laughable. Earth, a small blue planet in an unremarkable star system. The third planet from its yellow star, covered mostly in water, with primitive life forms that had only recently discovered how to leave their own atmosphere. The species called themselves humans, and they had been sending signals into space for barely 200 of their local years. "This is what we're discussing today?" Zixthon muttered to his aide, a young hegemony officer named Krelvas. "A species that still burns fossil fuels for energy?" Krelvas nodded, his own expression showing amusement. "The intelligence reports are quite detailed, sir. They have achieved basic spaceflight but only using chemical rockets. Their fastest ships take months to travel between planets in their own system. They have no faster-than-light travel, no energy shields, and their weapons are still kinetic projectiles and explosive devices." The ambassador laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "And they dare to send diplomatic messages to the Council? What could such creatures possibly have to offer the galaxy?" Around the hall, other representatives were having similar conversations. The Vorthon delegation was passing around images of human cities, pointing out the primitive transportation systems and the obvious lack of planetary defense networks. The Crystalline Collective had already dismissed Earth as beneath consideration for contact protocols. High Counselor Murthak called the session to order, and the Great Hall fell silent. The elderly Vorthon's voice echoed through the chamber as he began the day's proceedings. "We gather today to discuss the planet designated as Earth by its inhabitants, and the recent communications we have received from this world. Ambassador Zixthon, your empire has been monitoring this system. Please present your findings." Zixthon stood, his massive frame casting a shadow across the speaking platform. "Honored counselors, the Empire has conducted extensive surveillance of this primitive world for the past 50 standard years. The inhabitants, calling themselves humans, have only recently achieved the ability to leave their planet's surface, and even then, only in crude chemical-powered vessels." He activated a holographic display showing Earth and its solar system. "As you can see, their technological development is centuries behind even the most basic member worlds of our council. They have no faster-than-light communication systems, relying instead on electromagnetic radiation that takes years to cross even their own star system. Their energy production is still dependent on burning organic materials and splitting atoms. Most remarkably, they have no planetary defense systems whatsoever." Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the hall. Even the most backward worlds under Council protection had at least basic orbital defense platforms. "No defenses at all?" asked Counselor Veltara from the Nexus Confederation. "Surely they must have some protection against asteroids or cosmic debris." "They do track large objects that might strike their planet," Zixthon replied. "But their response is limited to sending small chemical rockets to nudge such objects off course. They have no energy weapons, no shield generators, and no military presence beyond their atmosphere." The display changed to show intercepted human transmissions. "However, the humans have been quite persistent in their attempts to contact us. They have sent hundreds of messages into space, using primitive radio waves and laser communications. Most of these messages contain mathematical sequences, scientific data, and what they call peaceful greetings." Counselor Murthak leaned forward in his chair. "What is the content of these messages? Do they request admission to the Council?" "Not exactly," Zixthon said, consulting his datapad. "The messages speak of their desire for peaceful contact with other intelligent life. They offer to share their scientific knowledge and cultural achievements. They also frequently mention their commitment to peaceful exploration and mutual understanding." Several counselors exchanged glances. The concept of a species actively seeking peaceful contact was unusual. Most civilizations were contacted by the Council only after they had developed sufficient technology to defend themselves or pose a potential threat to galactic stability. "What of their military capabilities?" asked General Thexmore of the Hegemony War Council. "Every species develops weapons. Even the most peaceful worlds maintain defense forces." Zixthon's expression grew even more amused. "Their military technology is remarkably primitive, General. They still use projectile weapons that fire metal slugs using chemical explosives. Their largest weapons release energy through nuclear fission or fusion. But these are planet-bound devices. They have never demonstrated any space-based military capability. The general's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. Chemical explosives? Do they still fight with swords and spears as well? Some of their military units do maintain such weapons for ceremonial purposes, Zixthon replied, causing another wave of amusement through the hall. But most interesting are their entertainment transmissions. The humans seem obsessed with fictional wars, often featuring conflicts in space with imaginary alien species. They create elaborate stories about space marines and galactic empires, and something they call holding the line against overwhelming odds. Counselor Veltara tilted her head curiously. They fantasize about space warfare without having the ability to conduct it? Precisely. Their entertainment suggests they have considered the possibility of hostile contact, but their actual preparations for such an event appear to be non-existent. They have no orbital weapons platforms, no interplanetary military vessels, and no apparent understanding of the technologies required for space combat. High Counselor Murthok stroked his chin thoughtfully. This presents an unusual situation. A species actively seeking contact, but with no ability to defend itself should that contact prove hostile. What are your recommendations, Ambassador? Zixthon's eyes gleamed with ambition. Honored Counselor, the Hegemony Empire has been seeking to expand our territory into new sectors. This human world presents an ideal opportunity for a bloodless conquest. Their planet is rich in resources. Their population is large enough to provide a useful workforce, and their complete lack of defenses means we could achieve total victory without losing a single ship. The suggestion caused immediate debate among the counselors. Some argued that conquering a defenseless world violated council principles. Others pointed out that humanity's apparent desire for peaceful contact made them potential allies rather than subjects. General Thexmore stood to address the council. If I may speak plainly, counselors, this human world represents either a valuable addition to our empire or a potential security risk if contacted by hostile forces outside our territory. Better that we establish control now, while they are unable to resist, than wait for them to develop dangerous technologies or fall under the influence of our enemies. But surely, said Counselor Veltara, a species that actively seeks peaceful contact deserves the chance to prove their intentions? Their messages suggest they would welcome membership in our galactic community. Zixthon's laugh echoed through the chamber. Respectfully, Counselor, what could such a primitive species possibly contribute to our community? They have no advanced technology to share, no strategic resources we cannot take more easily by force, and no military strength to aid in our collective defense. They would be nothing more than a burden on our resources. The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was increasingly clear. The Hegemony Empire's argument was persuasive to many counselors who saw Earth as either a prize to be claimed or a problem to be solved before it could grow larger. As the session drew to a close, High Counselor Murthok called for a preliminary vote. All those in favor of authorizing hegemony contact with the human world, with full discretion as to the nature of that contact? The vote was close, but the authorization passed. Zixthon bowed deeply to the council, already planning the deployment of his pacification fleet. None of them noticed the small, seemingly inactive probe that had been drifting in the outer system for the past 30 years, recording every word of their discussion. None of them wondered why a species obsessed with fictional space wars might have prepared for the real thing. The galaxy was about to learn that humans were very good at learning from their own stories. 3 months after the council session, Admiral Krextar of the Hegemony Third Fleet watched Earth grow larger on his command ship's main screen. The blue and white marble hung in space exactly as the intelligence reports had described it. Peaceful, defenseless, ripe for conquest. All ships report ready for pacification operations, announced his communications officer. The fleet is holding position at the edge of their solar system as ordered. Krextar nodded with satisfaction. 50 ships of the Third Fleet surrounded the human homeworld. More than enough firepower to reduce every city on the planet to rubble within hours. But the plan called for a bloodless conquest. Why waste useful slaves and valuable infrastructure when the humans would surely surrender at the first sight of superior technology? Open a communication channel to the planet, he ordered. All frequencies. I want every human on that world to hear this message. The communications officer worked at his console for a moment. Channel open, Admiral. You're broadcasting to the entire planet. Krextar stood and straightened his uniform. This moment would be remembered in hegemony history as the beginning of their expansion into this new sector of space. "People of Earth," he began, his voice carrying the authority of the most powerful military force in the galaxy. "I am Admiral Krextar of the Hegemony Empire. Your world is now under our protection and authority. You will cease all military activities immediately and prepare to receive our landing forces. Any resistance will be met with the complete destruction of your cities and the elimination of your population." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in across the planet below. "However, the hegemony is not without mercy. Surrender peacefully, and your people will be treated well as subjects of our empire. You have one standard day to respond with your formal capitulation. End transmission." The communications officer closed the channel and looked up at his admiral. "Message sent, sir. Planetary-wide reception confirmed." "Excellent," Krextar said, settling back into his command chair. "Begin long-range scans of their major population centers. I want to identify government buildings, military installations, and communication hubs. When they surrender, we'll need to move quickly to establish control." The hours passed slowly as the hegemony fleet waited for Earth's inevitable surrender. Krextar reviewed the intelligence reports again, studying the primitive human technology and their complete lack of space-based defenses. The operation was proceeding exactly as planned. 18 hours into the deadline, the communications officer reported incoming transmissions from Earth. "Admiral, we're receiving a response from the planet. Multiple sources, but they all seem to be saying the same thing." "Put it through," Krextar ordered, expecting to hear the trembling voice of some human leader offering unconditional surrender. Instead, a calm female voice filled the bridge. "Admiral Krextar, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of Earth Defense Command. We have received your message and appreciate your offer of protection. However, after consulting with our military advisors and government officials, we must respectfully decline your generous proposal." Krextar's eyes widened in disbelief. Had these primitives not understood the situation? The human continued speaking. "We value our independence and our right to determine our own future. We therefore request that your fleet withdraw from our solar system within the next 6 hours. We have no desire for conflict, but we will defend ourselves if necessary." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Krextar stared at the speakers as if they had malfunctioned. Finally, he found his voice. "Did that human just refuse our demand for surrender?" "Yes, sir," the communications officer replied, checking his instruments to make sure he had heard correctly. "They want us to leave." Krextar's laugh started as a low rumble and built to a roar that echoed through the bridge. "They want us to leave. 50 warships of the Hegemony Third Fleet, and these primitives think they can order us away with stern words." His tactical officer, Commander Velthon, looked up from his sensor displays with a puzzled expression. "Admiral, we are detecting some unusual energy readings from various points in the system. The signals are very faint and our computers can't identify their source. Probably they're primitive communication systems," Krextar dismissed with a wave of his hand. "Or maybe mining operations on their outer planets. The intelligence reports mentioned that humans mine asteroids for raw materials." "Yes, sir, but the energy signatures don't match any known mining technology. They're unlike anything in our databases." Krextar was no longer listening. The audacity of the human response had filled him with righteous anger. How dare these backward creatures refuse the generous offer of hegemony protection? Did they not understand that he could reduce their entire civilization to ash with a single order? "Commander Velthon, prepare the fleet for orbital bombardment. We'll start with their major cities. A few strategic strikes should convince them to reconsider their position." "Sir," his communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving another transmission from Earth." "More pleading?" Krextar asked with satisfaction. "Put it through," the same calm female voice returned. "Admiral Krextar, this is Admiral Chen again. Our sensors indicate that your ships are powering weapons systems and moving into attack formation. I want to be very clear about something. We tried diplomacy first because that's who we are as a species. We prefer to solve problems with words rather than weapons." There was a pause, and when the voice returned, it carried a subtle change in tone that made several bridge officers look up from their stations. "But make no mistake, Admiral. We are not defenseless, we are not helpless, and we are not afraid of you. This is your final warning. Withdraw your fleet from our system immediately, or face the consequences." Krextar slammed his fist on his command chair. "Consequences? What consequences could these primitives possibly threaten us with? Commander Velthon, target their largest city and prepare to fire. One demonstration of our power should end this foolishness. Admiral, the tactical officer said, his voice uncertain. Those energy readings are getting stronger. Much stronger. And they're moving. Moving? Energy readings don't move, Commander. Check your instruments. Sir, I've run diagnostics twice. The readings are definitely moving, and they're beginning to resolve into discrete contacts. Large contacts. Krextar turned to study the tactical display, his confidence beginning to waver. The screen showed the familiar icons of his fleet, but now there were other signals appearing at the edges of the display. Faint at first, but growing stronger by the minute. What am I looking at, Commander? I don't know, sir. The computer can't classify these contacts. They're too large to be ships, but they're definitely artificial. And Admiral, they're surrounding us. The communications officer suddenly straightened at his station. Admiral, incoming transmission from Earth. Admiral Chen again. Krextar's voice was no longer quite as confident as it had been. Put her through. Admiral Krextar, the human voice said, and now there was no mistaking the steel beneath the calm tone. You were warned. 6 hours is now 5 hours and 37 minutes. I suggest you use that time wisely. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Around them, the mysterious contacts continued to appear on the tactical display, growing stronger and more numerous with each passing minute. Commander Velthon looked up from his console, his face pale. Admiral, I'm reading massive energy signatures throughout the system. Whatever these things are, they're big. Bigger than anything in our databases. For the first time since arriving at Earth, Admiral Krextar felt a cold touch of doubt. The humans had refused to surrender. They had issued warnings instead of pleas, and now mysterious contacts were appearing all around his fleet. Perhaps these humans were not quite as defenseless as the intelligence reports had suggested. Continue monitoring those contacts, he ordered, trying to keep his voice steady. And keep trying to identify them. There has to be a logical explanation. But as the minutes ticked by and the contacts grew stronger and more numerous, Krextar began to suspect that the logical explanation might be the one thing he had never considered. The humans had been ready for this day. Admiral Krextar stood frozen on his bridge as the tactical display transformed before his eyes. What had started as faint energy readings was now resolving into something that defied every piece of intelligence the hegemony had gathered about humanity. Commander Velthon, he said quietly, please tell me our sensors are malfunctioning. The tactical officer's hands flew over his console, running diagnostic after diagnostic. Sir, I've checked everything twice. Sensors are functioning perfectly. Those contacts are real and they're massive. The display now showed dozens of enormous signatures scattered throughout the Earth system. Each one dwarfed the largest ships in Krextar's fleet. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. The most disturbing part was that they were moving with purpose, forming what any military officer would recognize as an encirclement pattern. How long have they been there? Krextar demanded. Unknown, sir. They appeared gradually over the past several hours, but our computers indicate they were using some kind of stealth technology. They could have been there all along. Communications Officer Thelmus looked up from his station with confusion written across his features. Admiral, I'm detecting massive data streams throughout the system. Military-grade encryption, multiple relay points, coordination protocols that are more advanced than anything in our own networks. Krextar felt sweat forming on his brow despite the cool air of the bridge. Are you telling me these humans have been coordinating fleet movements while we've been sitting here? It appears so, sir. The communication protocols are unlike anything we've seen, but the pattern is unmistakable. This is a coordinated military operation. The Admiral stared at the display, trying to process what he was seeing. According to every intelligence report, every surveillance mission, every analysis conducted by the hegemony's best experts, humanity was a primitive species with no space-based military capability. Yet the evidence before him suggested otherwise. Sir, Commander Velthon called out, his voice tight with tension. The contacts are moving into final positions. Whatever they are, they're completing an encirclement of our fleet. At that moment, the communications system crackled to life without any incoming signal indicator. The voice of Admiral Chen filled the bridge once again, but this time it seemed to come from everywhere at once. Admiral Krextar, I hope you're beginning to understand your situation. You came to our system expecting to find a defenseless world populated by primitive creatures who would cower before your superior technology. Krextar opened his mouth to respond, then realized he had never opened a channel. Somehow the humans were broadcasting directly to his ship without using any communication frequency his equipment could detect. You made several critical errors in your assessment, the voice continued. First, you assumed that our apparent technological limitations were real, rather than carefully maintained deceptions. Second, you believed that a species obsessed with fictional space warfare would have no actual preparations for the real thing. And third, you failed to ask yourselves a simple question. Why would a species that fears hostile alien contact advertise its defensive capabilities to unknown observers? The lights on the bridge dimmed momentarily, then returned to normal. Every hegemony officer present felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. Allow me to enlighten you about humanity, Admiral. We are a species that has spent our entire history preparing for the next war, while hoping it never comes. We study conflict, we analyze our weaknesses, and we prepare for threats we hope we'll never face. When we first detected your surveillance probes 37 years ago, we began the largest military preparation in our species' history. Krextar's blood turned to ice. 37 years ago? But our surveillance was completely passive. There was no way they could have detected every chemical rocket you observed, every primitive space station, every mining operation your analysts dismissed as harmless industrial activity, was part of an integrated defense network that has been under construction for 4 decades. We learned about your technology by studying your surveillance methods. We developed countermeasures by observing your capabilities, and we prepared for this day by assuming you would eventually come in force. The tactical display suddenly changed, and Krextar gasped at what he saw. The mysterious contacts were no longer mysterious. His sensors now clearly resolved them as ships, massive, sleek vessels that seemed to bend light around their hulls, ships that made his own fleet look like toys in comparison. What you're seeing now are our Dreadnoughts. Admiral Chen's voice continued with calm pride. Each one represents decades of research, development, and construction. Each one incorporates technology that we developed specifically to counter the capabilities we observed in your surveillance probes. Each one is designed to ensure that humanity will never again be at the mercy of a hostile universe. Commander Velthon stared at his console in disbelief. Admiral, I'm reading weapon signatures unlike anything in our databases. Energy output levels that exceed our most powerful ships by orders of magnitude. Shield generators that seem to manipulate space-time itself. But how? Krextar whispered. Our intelligence showed you had no advanced technology, no faster-than-light travel, no energy weapons. Your intelligence showed you what we wanted you to see, came the reply. Every civilization that achieves spaceflight eventually attracts attention from the galaxy beyond. We decided long ago that when that attention came, we would control the narrative. Yes, we use chemical rockets for civilian space travel. They're cheap, reliable, and make us appear harmless to observers. But our military vessels use technology that makes your faster-than-light drives look like steam engines. The main display shifted to show a view of space around the fleet. What Krextar saw there would haunt his dreams for the rest of his life. Dozens of ships that seemed to be made of crystallized night hung in perfect formation around his fleet. They moved with impossible grace, their hulls reflecting no light, their presence distorting the stars behind them. Each dreadnought carries enough firepower to sterilize a planet. Admiral Chen continued conversationally. But more importantly, they carry our commitment to never again be the victims of someone else's ambition. You came here expecting to conquer a defenseless world. Instead, you've discovered that humanity prepared for your arrival before your empire even decided to expand in this direction. Krextar found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. How many ships? In this system? 47 dreadnoughts, each one crewed by volunteers who have trained their entire lives for this moment. Throughout human space? That's classified information, Admiral, but I will say this. We've been very busy these past 4 decades. The hegemony admiral looked around his bridge at officers who had gone pale with shock. His mighty Third Fleet, the pride of the hegemony military, was surrounded by ships that outclassed them in every conceivable way. Ships that had been hiding in plain sight while his own forces approached with confident arrogance. What do you want? He asked finally. We want exactly what we said in our original response, Admiral. We want you to leave our system. We want you to return to your government and inform them that humanity is not interested in joining their empire, and we want you to carry a message to the Galactic Council. What message? That Earth is not defenseless, that humanity is not primitive, and that any future approaches to our world will be conducted with the respect due to a species that has the capability to defend itself. You were given the chance to leave peacefully. That offer stands for exactly 17 more minutes. Krextar looked at the tactical display one more time. 47 massive ships, each one a technological marvel that his own engineers wouldn't be able to understand, let alone duplicate. Ships that had been waiting in the darkness for decades, crewed by humans who had spent their lives preparing for this exact scenario. Helm, he said quietly, prepare to withdraw from the system. Sir? His executive officer asked in surprise. You heard me. Signal the fleet. We're leaving. Immediately. As the hegemony ships began their retreat, Admiral Chen's voice returned one final time. Thank you for your cooperation, Admiral Krextar. Your fleet will be escorted to the edge of our space to ensure there are no navigation errors. Have a safe journey home. The escort arrived within minutes. 6 of the massive dreadnoughts took positions around the retreating hegemony fleet. Their presence a polite but unmistakable reminder that humanity was now dictating the terms of engagement. As Earth shrank behind them, Krextar began composing his report to Hegemony Command. How could he explain that humanity had been playing a game of galactic chess while everyone else thought they were still learning the rules? The galaxy was about to discover that it had seriously underestimated the species from the small blue planet. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened within hours of Admiral Krextar's return to hegemony space. Representatives from across the galaxy gathered in unprecedented haste as word spread about the shocking defeat of the Third Fleet. Not destroyed, which would have been a tragedy. Humiliated, which was somehow worse. Ambassador Zixthan stood before the assembled council, his usual confidence replaced by barely contained panic. The datapad in his hands contained Admiral Krextar's full report, and every detail within it challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about humanity. Honored counselors, he began, his voice hoarse from hours of frantic preparation, I must present disturbing intelligence about the human situation. Our initial assessment was incomplete. High Counselor Murthak leaned forward, his ancient eyes sharp with concern. Ambassador, we have heard rumors. Is it true that 50 ships of your Third Fleet were forced to retreat without firing a single shot? The rumors are accurate, Counselor. Admiral Krextar's fleet encountered human military forces that were not detected by our surveillance operations. Forces that demonstrated technological capabilities far beyond our previous estimates. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the chamber. Counselor Veltara of the Nexus Confederation stood to address the assembly. Ambassador, your own intelligence reports described humanity as a primitive species with no space-based military capability. Are you now claiming those reports were false? Zixthan's mandibles clicked nervously. Not false, Counselor. Deliberately misleading. The humans engaged in what can only be described as the most sophisticated deception operation in galactic history. While appearing to be a primitive species focused on peaceful exploration, they were simultaneously developing military technology that surpasses our own capabilities. General Thexmore of the Hegemony War Council stood and activated a holographic display. Counselors, allow me to present the tactical data from Admiral Krextar's encounter. The display showed the Earth system as recorded by the Third Fleet's sensors. Empty space suddenly filled with massive ships that seemed to materialize from nowhere. Ships that dwarfed anything in the hegemony arsenal. These vessels, the general continued, demonstrate propulsion systems that manipulate space-time itself. Weapons that harness gravitational forces. Shield technology that bends reality around the ship. Every piece of technology they displayed is centuries beyond our current capabilities. Counselor Murthak studied the display with growing alarm. How many ships? 47 detected in the immediate engagement area, General Thexmore replied. But human communications suggest this represents only a fraction of their total fleet. They refer to these vessels as Dreadnoughts and indicate they have been under construction for approximately 4 decades. The implication sent shockwaves through the assembly. 4 decades of secret military construction, while maintaining the appearance of primitive innocence. It suggested a level of strategic thinking that no one had suspected from the humans. Ambassador Velketh of the Crystalline Collective rose from his seat. General, You're describing technology that should be impossible for a species that has never demonstrated faster than light travel. How do you explain this contradiction? They have faster than light travel, General Thexmore stated flatly. They've had it for decades. Every observation we made of their primitive rocket technology was an elaborate deception. While we watched them use chemical propulsion for civilian purposes, they were building a military fleet using technology we don't even understand. The revelation stunned the assembly into silence. The humans had not only hidden their true capabilities, but had actively fed false information to Galactic intelligence services for decades. Counselor Dexran of the Outer Rim Alliance stood up, his voice trembling with anger. Are you telling us that this primitive species has been manipulating the entire galaxy? That they've been watching us while we believed we were watching them? Ambassador Zixthan consulted his datapad before responding. Admiral Krekstar's report includes recordings of communications with the human military commander, Admiral Sarah Chen. Her statement suggests that humanity has been monitoring galactic civilization for over a century. They knew about the Council, about our technology, about our military capabilities, and about our expansion plans. Over a century? Counselor Murthak repeated. But their radio transmissions have only been detectable for 200 years. Which means they developed the capability to monitor our communications within decades of achieving basic spaceflight. General Thexmore confirmed. While we were dismissing them as harmless primitives, they were conducting the most comprehensive intelligence-gathering operation in galactic history. The council chamber erupted in heated discussions as representatives tried to process the implications. Every diplomatic contact, every military movement, every strategic decision made by the council for the past century had potentially been observed and analyzed by human intelligence services. Counselor Veltara called for order. What were humanity's stated intentions during this encounter? Did they make any demands or threats? Their demands were simple, Zixthan replied. They want the galaxy to acknowledge their right to exist as an independent species. They want to be treated with the respect due to a military power, and they want all future contact to be conducted through proper diplomatic channels. And if these demands are not met, General Thexmore activated another display showing the human dreadnoughts in formation. Admiral Chen was quite clear about their defensive posture. Humanity has no interest in conquest or expansion, but they have made it equally clear that they possess the capability to defend themselves against any threat, regardless of its size or origin. The display zoomed in on individual dreadnoughts, showing details that made even experienced military officers gasp. Weapons arrays that could reshape matter at the atomic level, defense systems that created localized distortions in space-time, hulls constructed from materials that seemed to absorb energy rather than reflect it. Each ship represents technology we cannot replicate, the general continued. Each ship carries enough firepower to threaten an entire fleet. And according to human statements, these 47 vessels represent only the defensive force for their home system. Counselor Murthak stroked his chin thoughtfully. What do we know about their total military capacity? Unknown, Zixthan admitted. Human Admiral Chen indicated that they have been very busy for the past 4 decades. Intelligence analysis suggests they may have constructed hundreds of these vessels, positioned throughout what they consider human space. The implications were staggering. A species that had been dismissed as harmless had secretly become one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. Worse, they had achieved this while maintaining perfect operational security for decades. Counselor Dexran stood again, his voice filled with fear and anger. This cannot be permitted to stand. No single species should possess such overwhelming military superiority. We must organize a coalition to neutralize this threat before they decide to use their power for conquest. General Thexmore's laugh was bitter. Counselor, I don't think you understand the situation. The humans don't need to conquer anyone. They already hold the superior position. Every world in Council space is within range of weapons that we cannot defend against, operated by a species that has been studying our weaknesses for a century. Then what do you suggest? Counselor Veltara asked. We adapt to the new reality, Ambassador Zixthan said quietly. Humanity has demonstrated that they prefer diplomatic solutions to military ones. They had every opportunity to destroy Admiral Krekstar's fleet, but chose instead to escort them safely out of human space. They could have announced their capabilities decades ago and demanded recognition, but chose instead to remain hidden until forced to reveal themselves. He paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. The humans have shown us that we gravely underestimated them, but they have also shown us that they are not interested in ruling the galaxy. They simply want to ensure that no one else rules them. High Counselor Murthak called for silence as he prepared to speak. The situation is clear. We face a species that has demonstrated both overwhelming military capability and remarkable restraint. Our choices are simple. We can recognize humanity as an equal partner in galactic civilization, or we can attempt to maintain our previous position of assumed superiority. The vote, when it came, was not close. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson about the dangers of underestimating a species that appeared harmless. Humanity would be approached with the respect due to a major power, but in the private chambers of military commanders throughout the galaxy, a different kind of planning was already beginning. Plans that would soon force humanity to demonstrate that their restraint had limits. 6 months after the hegemony's humiliating retreat from Earth, the galaxy had settled into an uneasy new normal. Humanity had been granted formal recognition by the Galactic Council, diplomatic channels had been established, and trade negotiations were proceeding cautiously. But beneath the surface of diplomatic politeness, tensions were building toward an inevitable confrontation. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center of the human Deep Space Monitoring Station, watching displays that showed activity throughout the galaxy. What she saw there confirmed her worst fears about galactic civilization's response to humanity's revelation. "Admiral," called Commander Martinez from the intelligence station, "we're detecting massive fleet movements in 7 different sectors. The hegemony is mobilizing their entire 2nd and 4th fleets. The Nexus Confederation has activated reserve formations. Even the normally peaceful Crystalline Collective is moving military assets toward the border zones." Chen nodded grimly. She had expected this response. Galactic civilization had spent centuries believing they understood the balance of power. Humanity's revelation had shattered that understanding. And now the major powers were preparing to restore what they saw as the natural order. "What's our intelligence assessment of their intentions?" she asked. "Mixed signals," replied Commander Kim from the analysis department. "Officially, all these movements are described as training exercises or routine repositioning. Unofficially, intercepted communications suggest they're coordinating a response to what they call the human threat." Chen walked to the strategic display that showed the positions of human forces throughout their territory. 47 Dreadnoughts in the Sol system. Another 63 positioned at key points throughout human space. More under construction in hidden shipyards that had been working around the clock for 4 decades. "They're making the same mistake the hegemony made," she said quietly. "They're assuming that because they outnumber us, they can dictate terms." The communication board lit up with an incoming transmission from the Galactic Council. Chen nodded to the communications officer to put it through. High Counselor Murthak's image appeared on the main screen, flanked by military advisors from several major powers. His expression was carefully neutral, but Chen could read the tension in his posture. "Admiral Chen," he began formally, "the Galactic Council requests an immediate conference to discuss recent developments in human space expansion." Chen raised an eyebrow. "Human space expansion? Counselor, we haven't expanded beyond our established territory in over 2 years." Nevertheless, the counselor continued, "Several member worlds have expressed concern about the implications of human military capabilities. They believe it would be beneficial for all parties if humanity agreed to certain limitations on fleet deployment and weapons development." The Admiral felt a cold smile form on her lips. So this was how it would begin, not with direct threats, but with diplomatic pressure backed by overwhelming force. The classic galactic approach to dealing with species that upset the established order. "I see," she replied calmly. "And what limitations are the Council proposing?" General Thexmore stepped forward into the transmission. "Admiral, in the interest of galactic stability, we propose that humanity limit its fleet to no more than 20 vessels of any class. Additionally, we request that all human military research be conducted under Council oversight to ensure that new weapons technologies do not upset the balance of power." Chen's expression didn't change, but every human officer in the command center felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. "General," she said quietly, Are you seriously proposing that humanity disarm itself and submit to foreign oversight of our defensive capabilities? We prefer to think of it as responsible participation in galactic civilization, Counselor Murthak interjected. No single species should possess military capabilities that dwarf those of all other civilizations combined. I see, Chen repeated. And what happens if humanity declines these generous proposals? The pause before Murthak's response told her everything she needed to know. Admiral, the Council hopes that won't be necessary. However, the galaxy cannot permit any species to maintain military forces that threaten the stability of interstellar civilization. Chen nodded slowly. Counselor, I need to consult with my government before responding to such a significant proposal. We'll need 72 hours to consider our position. Of course, Admiral. The Council looks forward to your response. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in tense silence. Chen walked back to the strategic display and studied the positions of human forces throughout their territory. Admiral, Commander Martinez said carefully, are we really going to consider their demands? Chen's laugh was soft but carried an edge that made seasoned officers pay attention. Marcus, we've been preparing for this conversation for 40 years. The only question was whether it would come as a diplomatic ultimatum or a direct attack. She activated the command override for the communication system. All stations, all ships, all commands. This is Admiral Chen with Priority Alpha authorization. Execute Protocol 7 immediately. Repeat, execute Protocol 7. Throughout human space, military bases that had masqueraded as research stations for decades came alive with activity. Shipyards hidden in asteroid fields began launching vessels that had been under construction in secret. Deep space monitoring posts activated targeting systems that had been quietly watching galactic fleet movements for years. Most importantly, hundreds of dreadnoughts that had been hiding in the dark spaces between stars began moving toward predetermined positions throughout the galaxy. Commander Kim, Chen called out. How many member worlds of the Galactic Council? 237, Admiral. And how many have military forces currently positioned outside their home systems? Kim consulted her displays. Approximately 60%, Admiral. They've spread their fleets thin, trying to demonstrate strength. Chen smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Perfect. Commander Martinez, prepare a response to the Galactic Council. Full diplomatic channels, maximum distribution. Message ready, Admiral. Counselor Murthak, I have consulted with my government regarding your proposals. Our response is as follows. Humanity appreciates the Council's concern for galactic stability. However, we must respectfully decline your suggestions regarding limitations on our defensive capabilities. She paused, watching the tactical displays as human forces moved into position throughout the galaxy. Instead, we would like to make a counter-proposal. The Galactic Council will immediately cease all military movements directed against human interests. All member worlds will withdraw their fleets to defensive positions within their home systems, and the Council will formally recognize humanity's right to maintain whatever military forces we deem necessary for our security. Another pause as the implications sank in. In exchange, humanity offers to serve as guarantor of galactic peace. We will ensure that no member world attacks another. We will prevent any single power from achieving the kind of dominance that has historically led to galactic conflicts, and we will use our capabilities to protect smaller civilizations from the ambitions of larger ones. The displays now showed human dreadnoughts positioned within striking distance of every major fleet concentration in the galaxy, ships that had been hiding in the dark for decades waiting for this moment. This offer is non-negotiable, Chen continued. Any attempt to use military force against humanity or our interests will be met with immediate and overwhelming response. Any attempt to build military coalitions against us will be prevented. Any attempt to threaten the independence of smaller worlds will be stopped. She looked directly into the camera, knowing her words would reach every government in the galaxy. The old order, where the strong dominated the weak and military might determine political power, is over. Humanity didn't seek this responsibility, but we will not shrink from it. We are now the guarantors of galactic peace, whether you accept that fact or not. The transmission ended. Within minutes, reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. Human ships decloaking near major fleet positions, defense systems activating around strategic installations, technologies that made the Council's most advanced weapons look like primitive tools. Commander Martinez stared at the displays in amazement. Admiral, how many ships do we actually have? Chen smiled, this time with genuine warmth. Marcus, we've been building dreadnoughts for 40 years. We've been hiding them throughout the galaxy for 20 years. We've been preparing for this day since we first detected alien surveillance of our system. She gestured to the tactical display, which now showed the true scope of human military deployment. We have 1,237 dreadnoughts positioned throughout galactic space. Each one represents the absolute pinnacle of human engineering and military technology. Each one is crewed by volunteers who have dedicated their lives to ensuring that humanity will never again be vulnerable to the ambitions of others. The implications were staggering. While the galaxy had been focused on the handful of human ships that had humiliated the hegemony fleet, humanity had been quietly positioning a military force that could dominate every civilization in known space.